And and dating is the same game, by the way, as well. The dating game in America is also the same. It's very interesting, actually. That's America.
Welcome to the Immigrant Experience in America, an immigrant human library, where we amplify and humanize the experiences of immigrants in the United States and around the world. Listen in as we add another story to our immigrant human library.
And my mom was going through her personal adjustment, and we had to move from one place to another. We were still living in Manhattan, but personally she was undergoing through personal issues. My sister with her things, it's not a pleasant thing to be an immigrant. So, and it's not, there's nothing exciting about it ever. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. So, but yeah, so
Except
that was,
except the except the naivete that we often come in with. You had just experienced a very traumatic situation of loss of your dad. So I understand mentally you were in a completely different place, emotionally different place, and the place that your father lost his life into a different world for you. But for me, I was just so naive. I mean, you watch the media, the Home Alone is still one of my favorite
I
Christmas
remember.
movies. And so you just come with all these like perceptions of,
Yeah.
what you think life is going to be here. And just you're so naive, you have no idea. So, but the reality, the culture shock hits you soon after when you start realizing that feeling of belonging that you probably had before, coming from a place where people knew you, everybody knows you and look out for you. You're thrust into a different world. Yes, it's an interesting journey to be an
Yeah,
immigrant in the United
for sure.
States.
For sure, for sure. And I talk to people. I mean, throughout all this time, like you, like I'm sure you speak to so many different people. You're an immigrant, and you hear so many different stories, and it never gets boring. How people, the paths they take, and how many bumps, and how many, and where they come from, and how long it takes them to get adjusted and not adjusted, or um, for their families, for their spouses, because just because you think you got adjusted doesn't mean that your spouse, depends who your spouse is also, whether he is an immigrant like you or your parents. I mean, there are so many parts to it. It is, I mean, I never get bored. It's the most interesting thing to me, actually. And the longer I live here, you would think, you get assimilated or whatever. There's not even such thing as assimilated, but you think you get used to living here. But it becomes ever more fascinating to me, actually, this issue.
Definitely. I'm on episode 160.
69. Yeah.
Yes.
169. Yeah.
And I tell you, every time I sit down, there is never a boring moment.
Yeah.
I find it boring when people don't take me deep. I want to go deep with you. I want to hear, if you have the language for it, I want you to take me there because I just feel like it broadens me. My mind expands emotionally. I find words to explain, like, oh, that's what I was feeling, and I didn't have the words for it. So I'm just so glad that I stepped out and start connecting with people and
Yeah.
all virtually. We have connected with all these people virtually, but I have felt everyone to my heart.
I wanted, being a Russian, coming from a Russian family. Where are you from? Tell me. What
Jamaica,
is,
Jamaica,
right? Okay.
Jamaica.
So I have one of my bestest friends is from Jamaica. Her and I connected. We have like an incredible story with us, but that's incredible story. So, but we, no, so for Russian family, Russian Jewish family, especially, you come to America. It doesn't matter whether you came yesterday or 5 years ago, 6 years, 7 years ago, you have to apply to the best colleges. And especially when we came from Russia, like we didn't know, my mom, like we only knew 4 or 5 names: Harvard, Yale, Princeton, like only the best Ivy League schools. So that's it. That's all we knew. My mom said, "This is where you're going. You're just applying there. It's not even you're applying. You're going there." You basically, maybe like Princeton is going to be your safety school. NYU, my mom was like, "What's NYU?" I don't know. Well, okay, well, it's in New York. Yeah, okay, you're going to NYU. So I, my mom and I are very close. We, of course, I listened to my mom. I always listen to my mom, and there I went. I started applying. People didn't want to be rude, and they. Okay, my grades were fine. From Russia, I had good grades, but I had to take lots of tests. And in the Soviet Union, they did, it's a different testing system. They never taught us how to take American tests. It's a skill that they teach you here. I see with my kids how they're being taught from like babies. They teach them how to do these bubbles, how to think in such a way that never, that's not, it's a different thing. So here I am, I'm put in this situation where, of course, I didn't test very well with those tests, so my scores were not very good. And, but I nevertheless I had very good grades from Russia. I had some good grades from America already, like from my first semester or whatever, and I get called in from Harvard. Get a letter from Harvard, from Cambridge, and they want to interview me. I go there, but I didn't get excited. I thought, fine, of course they want to interview. Why won't they want to interview me? So I went there and I was very happy and they interviewed me. The woman was very sweet. And this was my naivete, this thing with America. I thought, everybody, of course, everybody's gonna want me here. I wanted to come here my entire life, and this is exactly what my father told me about this country. Now my dream is going to come true, and everything is. This is the American dream. And I went there, and she came out, and of course she heard my story. And I remember also my first time in America when I on the exchange program they found out about my dad, and they did a big periodical, or editorial thing on me. So I think this is it. I'm gonna go to this beautiful school. This is has my name written all over it. Then, meanwhile, I'm applying to all the other schools, and then a month later, it was winter, I think already, because I remember the beautiful day. It was snow. I have another interview, Harvard, only not in Cambridge, Massachusetts, only here in New York at Harvard Club. Well, of course, I'm going. I was just, and they tell me, and somebody tells me, Anya, this is a big deal. They want second interview. And it was back then, in those days, they actually really interviewed people, if they colleges they wanted to interview. So I wore this beautiful Harvard Club. I'm trembling, and I wasn't trembling because I was nervous to interview. I was trembling because it's just the awe of this beautiful building. And this is, I remember that table, and there were a few other students there, I think, and the committee questions. I felt so comfortable, and all I could think about how I'm going to belong there and be there. And then a few months later, letters start coming in, and my first letter was from Harvard that they had no place for me. They did not accept me. And then my other letters was, and I remember I was also invited. I was interviewed in every single Ivy League school. Yale, I was interviewed, Yale person was in some law firm. He asked me about Westport, and I told him how much I hated it. And he said, that's very interesting because I lived there and I never thought of Westport in that way. So every school, Columbia, Barnard, and I started receiving those letters, and they were all rejections. And they were all, I think maybe one was waitlist. And then, but nothing was as painful to me as Harvard, because that was the school I imagined since my dad told me about Harvard. This was my degree of excellence that I had to achieve in America. That was it. And if I can't have that, then why do I need America? Why do I need this country? What is it going to do for me if I can't have that? And they didn't choose me, and I couldn't. I just couldn't put the two. I couldn't put together those smiling people who came out and hugged me and hugged my mom, and then the other interview. I said to myself, but why were they smiling? And of course I learned this whole American the know-how is that the smile means so little. This, you can smile all you want, but it does not mean the result. It doesn't mean you're going to close the deal. And I even didn't get accepted to NYU, my safety school. So I ended up going to Fordham, and I was, which was, it was, whatever school that was, it was not easy to be there. I mean, I had to work very hard, and but it was my first big layer of my first row of many disappointments in this country of my father's dreams. And it was, like we call in Russia, there is an expression, blow below the belt, or something we call it. But I had to deal with so many of those for many more years. But nevertheless, I did what I did. And I went to school and I studied sciences and I studied the arts and I wanted to go to medical school, but I wasn't probably as brilliant as my father was for that job, for that profession. So I wanted to thought to go to grad school to do art history, but then I realized that I'm not going to do much with that. And I worked for a number of years. I worked at Morgan Stanley. I worked at a bookstore, a beautiful bookstore, and then I realized I have to go and do something else. And I went to work at Morgan Stanley, and there were lots of people who worked there with double degrees in business and law. And many people told me before that I should try law school, but I thought, what am I going to do with law? What is this? Just what do you do with law? Medicine, I understood. I saw my father practicing my entire life. I saw patients. I liked it. I enjoyed it. What is this? It's so esoteric. It's so you can't touch it, and especially American jurisprudence. I just couldn't understand that. But then, I think it's my ego that led me to want to go to law school, because and I saw people, I met people who went to law school. I spoke to them. They were very interesting people at Morgan Stanley. They were very educated, and I just and once I decided to do it, there was nothing that was going to stop me not do it. So and that was what I did. So without understanding or knowing or imagining what it was going to be like, I entered law school, and I think it was like spitting blood in terms of difficulty, and it's I'm sure you probably heard it. It's very, they do teach you to think very differently about everything, about the world, about people, about small everyday situations. On the one hand, you s- on the one hand you start thinking about life as common sense, because you do start your life thinking about things as common sense, but as you grow older you become very philosophical. But when you come back to law school, it's actually common sense. But then there is, of course, it's trickier than that. So it's really thinking about things in a very different way. It teaches you to be sharp. It teaches you to be so on your feet all the time. But you have to always think. You have to, of course, your memory has to be trained, and you become like an animal by the end of the third year. And it humbles you a lot, extremely, a lot. You realize, because you're sitting next to people who are obviously immeasurably smarter than you and better than you, and of course professors who are so clever. Yeah, and you just learn.
Wow,
So
stretches you, right?
yeah,
I can't even, I've heard about the first year. I was considering law school at one point and I read the book 1L about the first year.
yeah.
And I had just finished my undergrad and I was like, man, if I had done this, maybe at the start of my undergrad, I probably would have had the energy. But then I thought, maybe I don't think I had the energy after undergrad to go through this first year in law school. And so I opted to go for a master's degree in international affairs. But I often look back and wonder, why didn't I try it? But be that as it may, here we are today. But listening to your experience about brings to mind an interview that I had with a lady from Nigeria. And she was like, I don't understand how Americans can lay off somebody tomorrow and today they were nice to them and smile with them. If you were in Nigeria, you would know that layoff was coming because you would see signs. And so that's kind of what you're experiencing of it, going through this application process. You're like, they were so sweet and welcoming and warm and nice to me. And they'd end up turning me down. This doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, exactly. I was shocked. It was so shocking. And it took me such a long time to get used to many rejections in the same way for a long time. Absolutely. And and dating is the same game by the way as well. The dating game in America is also the same. It's very interesting actually. That's America. Do everything
Yeah.
with a smile. Do everything, it's very
And
yeah,
then
it's
and then you just drop the gavel,
yeah,
if you just have to do it, you just have
yeah.
to do it, but do it with a smile. That's interesting. Okay, so no, I wonder your mom just and you seemed at 15, 16, and then by at this point, maybe after older than 18, you had that kind of immigrant mentality where you're in America and you have to go for the sky, right? The sky's the limit. You're
Yeah.
like your highest. It's
Yes.
not that your parents were pushing you. You just wanted it for yourself. It sounded like it, right?
Yeah, I wanted it for myself, and I really did believe that I was going to get it, and I had energy, like mental energy for that, for sure. I was, and but and my mom has always been of opinion that no matter what was going to do, I was going to reach the sky. She just has this ultimate. She just thinks I'm special, she just thinks she honestly she sincerely believes that, and I'm not saying it to be like really funny, but she really does think that. She doesn't. I mean, we have little things like on a like very simple level. We can argue about things, but big picture, she has always utterly and completely believed in me. And whenever I made decisions not to do something, like there was a time when I decided not to take the bar exam, even, when I was so exhausted and mentally, my mom, I mean, she questioned it, but then she said, well, maybe she knows best. But then, but she trusts my judgment in such a way because she thinks that no matter what Anya does is the right thing. So
Mm.
that's my mom. So that helps.
Yes, and it's a beautiful thing to have when you have one or both parents who believe in you that way, right? It gives you
Yeah.
such a fuel to keep going even when the
Yeah.
times are rough, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, I can imagine that's a beautiful thing and a mother's love too. I'm wondering that's part of it as well.
Yeah.
Just to believe in your child that they can do anything and powerful, powerful. So Anya, take me through. Okay, so you go off, you get into law school, you eventually pass the bar, and so where is life for you right now? What's dating like? What's social life like for you over these years adjusting?
Well, I was always very, I guess, conservative in terms of dating. Well, first of all, I didn't have time to really date because I was always at school and I didn't know exactly how you do it. I mean, I fell in love in college. That was my big first experience. I really fell in love, and that was very passionate. That was very toxic. That was very crazy. And then that kept coming in and out into my life, and that sort of I think that, and I write about it a lot in the book, and that I think defined my a sense of maybe passion or certain things uh, for for probably good in terms of how I see passion maybe or something in that way. But and then eventually maybe I dated a little more, and then I wanted and then I realized, very quickly, I think in America, intuitively, I realized that the dating scene here is very, you have to be careful, that because I was this traditional girl from a traditional family, and that if I don't get married soon, I might not get married. That was my it was my take on things. My mom's second marriage was to a restaurant owner in New York, and I described their marriage a lot, like in vividly in the book. It was a very interesting experience. They come from completely different backgrounds. There was nothing, could be nothing more different than my mom and this guy, as charming as he was. But I saw people in his restaurant, these kind of women who go, they hang out, they used to hang out by the bar. They're in their 30s, and then first they're 20s, then they're in their 30s, then they're in their 40s. And before you know it, this is it. And then they have difficulty finding someone, and this someone is looking at younger girls. So I sort of kind of, it was something that was sifting, like kind of going through my head, and it was my impression of things. And one thing I always knew, I didn't want to be an old woman trying to get a husband. And when am I going to do it? I just wanted to have it and do it and just be a complete woman. And it was, and no matter in the Soviet Union, all women, there's one thing that I always try to explain in this book, in that in the Soviet Union, we did not have a problem with feminism. There was no problem with this, because during the Soviet times, every woman was literate, every woman had a profession, every woman had to work way more, a lot of times, than men. Because, first of all, because of all the wars that happened in Russia and the Soviet Union after the revolutions, wars, famine, because all so many men were either in jail, in prison, so many of them were drunk, dead. They were just, so women had to take it upon themselves to be everything. They had to be farmers, they had to be factory workers, they had to be teachers, they had to be doctors, they had to be engineers. So people in the Soviet Union, post Bolshevik Revolution, became by 1930s 99% literate. Everyone. That's one good thing that Bolshevik
Wow.
Revolution gave to the Soviet Union. So, and of course, by virtue of men being absent, a lot of them, not all, of course, but a big percentage, women had to take it upon themselves. But little surprise, women didn't like it all that much. They were entertained by it at the beginning, at the dawn of the revolutionary days, when when they got their rights in 1920s, when they of course, it was great for them to have the opportunity. But then they became workhorses. They had to do everything, and as we all know, what the Soviet regime had to offer its citizens was misery. Nothing but misery. It was not what America, even in its darkest times, even post Great Depression, you can't even compare what Russia, how Russia, what the Soviet regime had to offer its citizens during its years of famine, after Civil War, then the Great Famine, then the Great Terror, etc., etc. Women were absolute, like there was legitimate slave labor. So, and they had to bring up children, they had to work. It was horrendous. So definitely feminism was not an issue, but they always wanted, what they wanted was to be taken care of. What they wanted was, they wanted to be normal mothers. They wanted was to be, they had to abort their babies, because how were they going to take care of them? Huh?
Mm.
There was no way. So but of course, all they craved was normal men. All they craved was normal families. All they craved was flowers, lipstick, beautiful dresses, everything that in the 60s women here in America were parading against. It's a very different thing. It's sometimes it's a fine line. But sometimes it's not a fine line at all. It's a very different. That's why women in Russia, and people sometimes say, "Oh, women in Russia are so this, they're so different." So on the one hand, they're very educated, they have all these careers, but still, for them, just like it was a very patriarchal society a long time ago, back, it still had retained, even though a lot of times men are very, they don't, but to them still, they want to have a strong man in the house. They want to have a strong man that takes care of her, even if she knows that sometimes he's not that good in every way, but they want to have that that backbone, that pillar, so that she can relax a bit.
Yeah, that
So,
cover, that leader, that
yeah.
cover. I totally get what you're saying. And
So,
what you're when you say workhorses, I think you said workhorse. I hope I'm
yeah,
not forgetting what you
yeah,
said, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
call in my book Decoding America and Coming Home to Yourself, the Immigrant Experience, I call it human doing. So you totally like get away from this human being of just being able to be with nature, being in silence, like be calm and to be in community, enjoy gatherings with family and friends and just be immersed
Yes,
into that. You become a tasker. And
exactly.
I developed that personality after being here in the United States. I wasn't like that when I arrived as a young girl. But just constantly making lists and your mind is just like machine like from one what's next? What's next? Anytime my list is done, I literally find myself stopping and thinking, did I miss something? Like, what else is there to do? Like, anytime you have white space or any free time. And I'm like, this is insane. I have to rest. And then I end up getting myself to burnout, right? So I pose
And
the questions in the book like, what are we going to do with our men? They want to support us. We have to occupy this earth together. Are we going to send them to Venus? Or what they say, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Are we going to send them to Mars? And then you find like this kind of sentiment where women are frowning on those of us who want to be mothers, even if it could mean that you leave completely or you partially continue to work and also get married and raise your family. Some people frown upon that, like you're leaving the feminist movement, like you're leaving the movement alone. And I'm just like, what sort of society are we going to be when we it seems like they want to replace men in the workplace? And I say, let men work. Let these
exactly,
men work.
but this is already so bad because I feel like by our behavior in this way, we're emasculating men, and I feel like they're so emasculated because they put their hands down because they're so afraid to argue with us already. They're like, okay, then go do that thing. So they're neither working, because men are not really equipped to look after children. They're not. So they, just because they know how to change half a diaper once, they already, but so they neither doing this nor that they're doing the other. So a woman is trying to do both, but you cannot be good at either. So meanwhile, a woman's natural proclivity is, of course, we know what it is. So so we've emasculated a male, and I think a male's, most men, again, there are always exceptions, but most men's natural adrenaline rush is when he knows that he can prove himself in his career. And when
Yes,
he
and
doesn't,
taking and providing for
right,
a family.
protecting
I
his
have
family.
I have lots of male cousins, brothers, my dad, uncles, and I tell you, I watch my cousins grow up, and it seems that they are lost until they find that girl and they get married and now they have a child. All of a sudden, the light bulb goes on. They know
Yeah,
what to do,
yeah.
and they're made for that because our hormonally as women, I really don't think we are made to take on those levels of stress that men are naturally able to take on. And
I
so I say we really need to fall back into our feminine energy and allow space for a man to be what they were created to be. And some might argue, oh, this is religious conservatism, etc. But listen, I'm choosing that for me. You can choose, anybody who's listening and might want to argue with me, you choose what you want to choose for yourself. But I say there has to be a space for a young woman to be able to freely know that if you want to be a mother and to stay at home and be a wife and not chase the work profession outside of the home, you should have that right and freedom and to be just as honored for doing that.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. Because and you need and if as a woman, if you're constantly debating and fighting this, then what happens in the end, you're never at peace with yourself, and then your man is never going to be at peace. So you can never tame him, and there is this constant fight. There is never that you're ruining both.
Join us next time for part 3 of this episode. We thank our listeners around the world, and we appreciate your continued support as we build our human library. Please remember to give us a 5-star review, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, and circle of influence.